Hey guys, it's Miss Johnson, and I'm here to bring you our notes for Unit 4, Learning Target 5. Today we're going to continue our conversation about the quadratic formula, and we're going to look at some other special cases that come up when we are solving quadratics. But the bottom line is we're still identifying A, B, and C, plugging it into the quadratic formula, and then you just go from there. So one thing that we have to make sure of is that we have our quadratic formula in standard form. If you don't remember what standard form of a quadratic is, because it's been a while since we've looked at it, we have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And that's the piece that's going to be important today, paying attention to that equation being equal to 0. Then the other thing to take note of is if there's a missing term, then that term gets filled in with a 0. So we saw this a little bit when we were doing factoring. We would factor some expressions that had the b term missing, and we'd fill in a 0x in the middle. The same goes for the quadratic formula. We do the same thing here. So let's take a look at number 1. I have 4x squared plus 8x plus 7 is equal to 4. The first thing that I notice is that this equation is not set equal to 0. So I need to take care of that first. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides so that that turns into a 0, which is what I want. Now, because 4 is a constant, it's going to go together with the constant of 7. That's what it lines up with. That's what gets combined there. So the other terms stay the same. 4x squared plus, if I could write there, 8x, and then 7 minus 4 is 3, so plus 3. So now that's my A, that's my B, and that's my C. You can't identify your A, your B, and your C until this is equal to 0. Now I can go ahead and plug it into the formula. So I have the opposite of B, that's negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times 3. 4AC there. And then all divided by 2 times A, which is 4. So then I move on, I'm going to start under the radical. X is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 3 is 48. So minus 48, and then divide by 8. Now take care of that subtraction. So I have x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus 64 minus 48. That's 14, 15, 16. 64 minus 48. I'm typing it into my calculator. Yep, 16. So I have the square root of 16 there, all divided by 8. Next, I take care of this. I'm going to come up to my new row. So I'd have x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 16, which is 4, divided by 8. And then I need a brighter color here so that you can see over that blue. We'll go purple next. So I need to split that. X is equal to negative 8 plus 4. Sorry, I meant to do plus or minus there. I forgot my minus. Plus and minus. So negative 8 plus 4 over 8. And then negative 8 minus 4 over 8. So you can see this green on here. Negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. So that turns into negative 1/2. So there's one of my solutions. And then negative 8 minus 4, that's negative 12 divided by 8. And that's negative 3 halves. Sorry, hello. Negative 3 halves. You could turn that into a decimal if you made it x equals negative 1.5. That would work as well. Over here, x equals negative 0.5. That's fine. Decimal answers are just fine, or you can leave them as a reduced fraction. Okay, moving on. Let's take a look at number 2. In number 2, I have 2x squared minus 7x minus 13 is equal to negative 10. So again, the first thing that I notice is this right here is not a 0. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides. That 10 is a constant, so it goes with the 13. So I have 2x squared minus 7x, and then negative 10 plus 13 is negative 3. Now I'm equal to 0. Now I can plug it in and solve. Here's my A, here's my B, here's my C. So that's x equals opposite of B, so positive 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared. Make sure you put that in parentheses. Minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is negative 3. All divided by 2 times A, which is 2. Start under the radical. Negative 7 squared is positive 49. So 7 plus or minus 49. And then 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. And a negative times a negative is positive. So plus 24. 2 times 2 is 4. Go ahead and take care of that. 49, 59, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73. There. I just did that in my head. You, of course, can pick up your calculator if you'd like. There's no problem with that. So 7 plus or minus the square root of 73, all divided by 4. And then I'm ready to take the square root. So I'm going to come up here. I have x equaling 7 plus or minus, I keep forgetting to write that minus right there. The square root of 73 is going to be 8 point something. Type that into your calculator. Second square root, and then 73. Oh, come on. There we go. 8.54 is what I get there. So I would just round that to the nearest hundredths place, which is the second decimal place out. You're going to have to round it at some point because that's a non-terminating decimal, so it goes on and on and on forever. So we just go to the hundredths place, and that's enough. That's plenty of decimal places. Okay, so split it apart. X equals 7 plus 8.54 divided by 4. X equals 7. Uh-oh, I need to change my color here. Minus 8.54, all divided by 4. That gives me, here we'll go purple, 7 plus 8.54 would be 15.54. So x equals 15.54 divided by 4. And then x equals 7 minus 8.54 is negative 1.54 over 4. And then actually do that division. So bust out your calculator if you don't have it already. 15.54 divided by 4 gives me 3.8. We'll call it 3.89. And then over there, negative 1.54 divided by 4 is 0.39. Sorry, negative 0.39. So there's one decimal answer, there's another decimal answer, and there we have it. Let's take a look at number 3. In number 3, I have 5x squared minus 80 is equal to 0. So the first thing that I notice is that my equation is set equal to 0, so that's good. Check there. But over here, I've got an a term and a c term, but the b term is missing. So if the b term is missing, that means I fill it in with a 0. So 5x squared plus 0x minus 80 is equal to 0. All right, so now let's see what that does to our quadratic formula. So now here's my a, here's my b, here's my c. When I plug it in, it looks like the opposite of b, which is negative 0. Now you might be thinking, negative 0, what does that mean? It really doesn't mean anything. It's still just 0. There's no way to make 0 a negative. It's still 0. So I have 0 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Again, 0 squared, still going to be nothing. Minus 4 times 5 times negative 80. And then I have that all over 2 times 5. All right, so let's see what happens next. So I'm just going to ditch that negative and call it 0, which is fine because that's the same thing. Under here, I have 0 because 0 squared is 0. And then I have negative 4 times 5 times negative 80. Negative 4 times 5 times negative 80. Big number, 1,600 there. So, and negative times a negative is plus. So 0 plus 1,600 all over 10. 2 times 5 is 10. Now what happens next? Add these together and it's still just 1,600. So I have 0 plus or minus the square root of 1,600 all divided by 10. All right, to the top. So square root of 1,600 is going to be 40. So I have x equals 0 plus or minus 40 all over 10. Now, you may be thinking, oh, I don't need to split that. That's a 0. But there is a difference between adding 40 and subtracting 40. So you actually do need to split it here. So when I split this, it looks like x equals 0 plus 40 over 10. And x equals 0 minus 40 over 10. That gives you a negative 40 over 10 and a positive 40 over 10. So x equals 40 over 10 and x equals negative 40 over 10. So there are two different solutions here because there's a difference between 0 plus 40 and 0 minus 40. 40 over 10 gives me positive 4, and negative 40 over 10 gives me negative 4. So I have positive 4 and negative 4 for my solutions there. So bottom line is, if you don't have a zero term, or if you're missing a term, fill it in with a 0. If you're missing a term, fill it in with a 0. All right, so let's take a look at number 4. So in number 4, I have 40x squared minus 88 is equal to 2. There's a couple of problems going on here. First of all, I notice that this is set equal to 2 and not 0, which means I need to subtract my 2 to make that go away. So that gives me 40x squared, and then the 2 goes with the 88 because they're both constants. Negative 88 minus 2 is negative 90. All right. So there's my first problem. Now my second problem is the fact that I've got an x squared and a constant, but again, I have no b. So that's going to be filled in with 40x squared plus 0x minus 90 is equal to 0. Now I can go ahead and plug it in. Here's my a, here's my b, here's my c. I have x equaling the opposite of b squared. Remember, we talked about how that's negative 0, or the opposite of b, negative 0. And then I have b squared, 0 squared, minus 4 times 40 times negative 90, all over 2 times 40. Big numbers here. Let's see what that does for us. So negative 0, which is really just 0. 0 squared, again, just 0. Negative 4 times 40 times negative 90. Negative 4 times 40 times negative 90. Positive 14,400. 14,400. Ooh. 2 times 40 is 80. All right, adding those two, obviously adding 0 doesn't change anything. So 0 plus or minus, I ditched the negative because it doesn't make a difference. 0 plus or minus 14,400 divided by 80. And now take the square root. So in your calculator, type the square root of 14,400 and you should get 120. So here, I'm going to come up a little higher this time. X is equal to 0 plus or minus 120 over 80. Split them apart. That's x equals 0 plus 120 over 80. And x equals 0 minus 120 over 80. Sorry if that's hard to read. So then I have x equaling 120 over 80 and x equaling negative 120 over 80. Do the division there. It's just 12 over 8. I mean, you can ditch your zeros because you've got a 0 on top and 0 on the bottom, so divide by 10. You've got 12 over 8. That's the same thing as 3 over 2, right? Or just go to your calculator, 120 divided by 80, and you get 1.5, which is, yes, 3 over 2. So x equals 1.5 here. And then the beauty of that is it's the same thing, only negative. Negative 1.5. So there you go. There's your two solutions, positive 1.5 and negative 1.5. All right, next one. 16x squared minus 4x is equal to 0. Okay, here's what we're missing this time. I've got an a term. I've got a b term because I have an x with that 4, but I don't have a c. So that means my c term is the one that's going to be 0. 16x squared minus 4x plus 0 is equal to 0. So let's plug it in and see what happens. Here's my a, here's my b, here's my c now. So x equals the opposite of b, so that's positive 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 16 times 0. Check that out. It's going to be interesting. So 2 times 16 in the bottom. Take care of the top. So I have x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared is 16. 4 times 16 times 0. You don't even need to type it in. You can if you want to, but you don't need to. Anything multiplied by 0 is still 0. 2 times 16 is 32 in the bottom here. 16 minus 0 is 16. 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 all over 32. All right. Coming up to the top. X equaling 4 plus or minus, the square root of 16 is 4 over 32. Split them apart. That's x equaling 4 plus 4 over 32, and x equaling 4 minus 4 over 32. So the left one, 8 over 32, is a quarter. X equaling 8 over 32, that's x equaling 1/4. The right one, this is interesting. You get x equals 0 over 32. Well, 0 divided by 32 is still 0. So there you have it. There's your two solutions. That's a 0, sorry, not a 6. X equals a quarter and x equals 0. All right, last question of the day. So number 6, 3x squared plus 8x equals 0. So let's go ahead and look at our equation. I've got an a term, I've got a b term because it has the x, but I'm again missing the c. So that means my c term is the 0 one. So I have negative 3x squared plus 8x plus 0 is equal to 0. Here's my a, here's my b, here's my c. X equals the opposite of b, negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times 0, all over 2 times negative 3. That is negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 plus 0. Negative 4 times negative 3 times 0 is 0, all over negative 6. Negative 8 plus or minus 64 plus 0 is 64 over negative 6. And then let's bring it up here. X equals negative 8 plus or minus 8 over 0. Oh, I'm sorry, over negative 6. That wouldn't work. Can't divide by 0. Over negative 6. Okay, split them apart. X equals negative 8 plus 8 over negative 6, and x equals negative 8 minus 8 over negative 6. That gives me x equals negative 8 plus 8 over 6 is 0 over negative 6, and x equals negative 16 over negative 6. This one, easy. 0 over negative 6 is 0. Negative 16 divided by negative 6, that's going to be a plus. That's going to be 8 over 3. I just reduced it. Again, if you plug it into your calculator and get a decimal answer, that is just fine. No problem. All right, so thanks for tuning in today. That's our last example. Have a great day. Work on your practice assignment, and if you have questions, let us know, and we'll catch you next time.